Welcome back. All right, so the second division I decided to look at is the Atlantic. Why? Because I knew Atlantic Division teams had a lot of draft picks. I want to get through as many as I can. So I thought, all right, we'll take a look at the Atlantic because I knew Buffalo, Montreal, Ottawa, pretty aggressive at picking up draft picks. I also want to say I've seen a lot of people going, oh, the board is back. No. Your standard news video, I still won't be using the board for. When it's multiple contracts at certain cap hits, I have no problem putting a board up for that. But in general, for news videos, it's not necessary. So, yeah, the board's not back. I'm seeing a lot of, yay, it's back. It's really not. This isn't a news video either. I even saw comments about my review of what the Pacific did. Oh, they got their board back. How in the world would I do this without a board? Man, that's just, I'd have to have timestamps for every single player. No. No. Okay, so we're going to start off talking about Boston. Boston didn't have a pick until 54th, where they draft Matthew Poitras. Good offense, but he's 5'10" as a center and skating issues, which again can be fixed. Absolutely, you can fix skating issues, but it does take some time. At 117th, another center. This is a team that needs center depth. Cole Spicer, good forechecker, seen as a guy who could end up being a good fourth line player at some point in his career. Then at 119th, Dan's Lockmelis, center, is drafted. Hard worker, but needs more speed to his game. So it's not just the skating, it's about making decision making needs to be a little bit faster, that kind of thing. But again, three centers for Boston to start off. Then they look at the blue line at 132nd. They draft Frederick Brunet. NHL shutdown potential. He was an overager. There are a lot of overagers in this draft. We'll see whether or not that means we get more guys who are drafted as an overager who end up making the NHL than usual. Number 183, they went with goaltending. They went with Reed Dick, goaltender, fast, good hands, so he's good stick handler. Played behind a pretty leaky defense. The problem with that is that it means it's going to hurt his overall stats. And so there's some question about how good he might be if he's behind a better defense. So we'll see what happens there. Number 200, Jackson Edward, defenseman. Aggressive player, needs to work on the mechanics of the game. So the aggression is there, the physicality is there. It's about working on the mechanics. Then we get to Buffalo. So let's go ahead and get into what Buffalo did. Busy team. 3 first-rounders, starting with Matthew Savoy, center. This is another team that went heavily towards centers. Savoy's seen as pure skill and a good second half to the season. Definitely improved his stock as the year went along. At 16, they drafted Noah Ostland, also a center. Good playmaker. He needs to improve the physical aspects of the game, however. So that's 2 centers. Your third center, Yuri Kulich. Now, Kulich may end up being a winger at the NHL level. And one of the reports I read said if they make him a winger, it's probably going to be better for his game than as a center. He's seen as a smart player and could end up being a middle six scorer, so second or third line scorer for the Buffalo Sabres. At 41, goaltender Topias Leinonen ends up going there. Big, quick goalie, a little rough around the edges, as every goalie that gets taken as an 18-year-old in the draft tends to be. So a Finnish goaltender. They've already got Luukkonen. Now they've got Leinonen, and we'll see how things go there. Number 74, they draft Victor Nuchev, left winger. Sees the ice well. There's issues with turnovers. He's an average skater, so probably needs to add another gear in order to make it to the NHL. But there's something there. 106, they draft Mats Lindgren, defense. His stock dropped. He was seen as potentially a second round pick, and it dropped as the season went along. He needs to work on some of the mechanics of the game, and this again is where your strength and conditioning coach comes in, your overall development system. Then at 134, Vsevolod Komarov. Anyways, defense. He adjusted to North America well. Needs some work on his skating. So I will work on the pronunciation of his name while he works on getting his skating up to where it needs to be to make a real run at being an NHL level defenseman. Then at 170th, Jake Richard is drafted. Forward, just listed as a forward so you can play multiple positions. Good shot and some skating issues. So that's how that works. 187th, Gustav Karlsson is drafted, center. Goal scorer, but seen as needing to add a little bit of meanness to his game, a little more competitiveness, just that getting that effort to that next level. At 202nd, they drafted Joel Ratkovich Burnson, left winger. He's 6 foot tall, 179 pounds, meaning I could not find any report on him at this stage. And that being true as well of the 211th picked Linus Sjödin, a right winger. He's 6 foot tall, 168 pounds. That tells me he's going to have to add some weight if he's going to be an NHL player. So Buffalo takes a couple of guys in the last round there that, may end up being a steal. It's one of those things where when a guy's not ranked and not necessarily talked about, you wonder, so the team that grabbed him, what did they see that other publications, other teams did not? So moving on to the Detroit Red Wings. For Detroit, they draft Marco Kasper at 8th. Good pick, I think. Good speed, good hands, and played against men this year as well. So this may very well be a player who could potentially push for a job. Maybe he gets a 9-game tryout with Detroit this year, and we see where things go from there. At 40th, they draft Dylan James, a left winger. Good board play, physical, and the way that his game works, because the offensive upside isn't necessarily there, he's likely a fourth-line player. Then, at 52nd, they drafted Dmitry Bachelnikov, left winger, fast-paced, energy player, but seen as being on the small side. So, size, you can't coach size. So, there are definitely going to be some players who, as being on the smaller side, end up probably being AHL players instead of NHL. At 105th, they drafted Anton Johansson, defenseman. He's 6'4", 172 pounds, and I couldn't find a lot on him either. So we'll see with Johansson, 6'4", defenseman, what Yzerman's got up his sleeve. 130th at center, Amadeus Lombardi, one of the best names I've ever heard in the history of hockey. He has speed and he has skill. There's some skating issues there, so if that can be overcome, this may end up being a guy who's a steal. We may look back on it later and see a steal there. At 129th, they drafted Maximilian Kilpinen, left winger, and again, 6'1", 174 pounds. Couldn't find a lot on him either. So definitely it feels like more players that there's not a whole lot of notes on for the Atlantic than there was for the Pacific. At 137, they draft Tanias Mathurin, a defenseman. Good defense, good overall defenseman, likely third pairing. So third pairing defensive defenseman is likely his future. At 201st, they draft Owen Mellenbacher, forward, good hands, good frame as well, but he gets knocked off the puck a little bit too easy, and they said he gets knocked off his skates a bit too easy as well. So that's something he's going to need to work on. At 212th, Brennan Ali, a center. Big, works hard, not seen as a skill player though. So he's one of those guys that if he makes it to the NHL, it's going to be that hard work that gets him there, and his physical size as well. So Ottawa, I think, or Detroit, I should say, I think did relatively well here. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 players overall. So pretty good day or 2 days, I'll say, for Detroit. And so we'll see how many amazing moves that were made there by Steve Yzerman. Because again, at the draft table, he seems to be pretty good. All right, Florida. Florida didn't draft till 93rd overall. They drafted a defenseman, Merrick Alsher. Good second half to the season. He's a hitter. Some good defense there as well. So he moved up the draft board, and this might be a guy who ends up being a steal for Florida. At 125th, they draft Ludwig Jansson, a defenseman. Fast, skilled, but he plays the game a little fast. So, the players that you see, and you're like, okay, if you slow it down and pay a little more attention to what's going on here rather than going full bore, you might have a better result. And that's what was said about him. So that is absolutely coachable as well. At 157th, they draft Sandis Vilmanis, left winger, good puck handler, and he needs to speed his game up. So might I suggest that during training camp, you put these two guys together. You learn to be a little slower. You learn to be a little faster. We'll put you guys together. Works out well. At 186th, Josh Davies, left winger, is drafted by Florida. Small, but a hard hitter. He needs to work on his zone exits. Zone exit numbers, not pretty with him. But it is interesting, too, when they're a hard hitter and they're smaller, how many of these guys end up reaching the NHL and how many of them, again, have that AHL ceiling, right? So we'll see what happens with Davies. At 189th, Tyler Muslik, goaltender, drafted by Florida, as every team seemed to find a goaltender except Detroit. Detroit didn't find a goaltender they liked. Did Ottawa? Yes, they did. Tampa Bay? Yes. Toronto? Also? Yes. Montreal did as well. So Florida, Tyler Muslik, good instincts, but predictable. So he needs to add that a little bit more of a surprise to his game where it's not as easy to predict where he's going to be on any set play. At 214th, they draft Liam Arnsby, center, physical, good defense, with some skating issues. So again, the skating will cause guys to drop in the draft. At 221st, they draft Jack Devine, a right winger, strong effort, but he needs some work on the offensive side of the puck if he's going to make it to the NHL. The effort's there, the work's there. So if that work ethic continues the way that it's looked through what I was reading with his overall scouting reports, it might be a chance. Then we get to Montreal. So Montreal, of course, being the home team for this, they draft Juraj Slafkovsky, left winger. He played well against men, and he's a goal scorer. So played against men this year, goal scorer, and overall his numbers were very, very good. 26, they draft Philip Messer, who is a right winger, speed, offense, but he's small, and he plays around the periphery. So he's going to have to start driving to the net. He's going to have to find a way to overcome the issues with the size, which probably means adding some muscle without losing any of that speed, and that can be kind of tricky. But yeah, so that's your number 26 pick, and then at 33rd, they draft Owen Beck, a center, fast, skilled, and seen as a skilled player, but for whatever reason, his production wasn't there. So he's got all the tools, but the production this year wasn't there. So this, again, could end up being a steal if that offensive instinct that looks really good and his overall skill level is really good, if it starts translating to points, may have yourself a steal for the Montreal Canadiens. At 62nd, they draft Lane Hudson, a defenseman. Offense is there. He's also very good at being evasive when it comes to challenging the other team's defense, but there's some skating issues that dropped him down on the draft lists. At 75th, they draft Vincenz Rohrer, a center. Small, physical, but he can be top 9 in the NHL with some improvement on the offensive side of the puck. So again, you have a small, physical player, and so we'll see how that goes for him. At 92nd, Adam Engstrom, a defenseman. The skating's there, the reach is there as well. The issues come from reading the play, and that is coachable, right? So issues with reading the play, but there's lots of time. At 127th, they draft Cedric Guindon, a left winger. Strong second half to his season. He's a smart player, but he's seen as needing some work in various parts of his game. The mechanics, a little bit with the skating as well. And so, yeah, the fact that he got better as the season went along and he's seen as a very smart player, there is that potential for the 127th pick to end up in the NHL. 130th, they draft Jared Davidson, a center. He's 20 years of age, so that's another overager. 89 points for Seattle in the WHL this year. And again, when you see the offense for guys who are past their draft year, you've got to take that with a grain of salt. But still, at least he's shown that offense, right? At 162nd, goaltender for Montreal, Emmett Croteau. He is 6'4", 194 pounds, and he is headed off to Clarkson University. So, university commit, and the fact he's 6'4", I sometimes wonder with GMs, they just look at the goaltending list and go, how tall is this guy? 6'6", and draft that guy. 6'4", we'll grab him. At 194th, they draft Petteri Nurmi, a defenseman. He's 20 years of age, so again, overager, and plays for HPK in Liga. Now, one thing that drafting these guys who are older does is it means that if they're 20 years of age, they could put them in Laval. They can play for the Laval Rocket right away. Now, at 216th, they draft Miguel Tourigny, defenseman, 31 goals. And the reports basically say, yeah, he's a forward. He's a defenseman in name, sure, but he's basically a forward. And what I wonder is if Montreal would convert him to forward. Wouldn't be the first time we've seen a guy get drafted as a forward or a defenseman, and then as he becomes a pro, he gets switched. So we'll see whether or not Tourigny ends up being a forward, which would help cover up where some of the flaws in his game are apparently defensively. So that's an interesting one because, again, 31 goals at junior level, it's nothing to scoff at for a defenseman. So we'll see whether or not he ends up being a steal as well. Now we get to Ottawa. The Ottawa Senators didn't draft until 64th. They draft Philip Norberg, a defenseman who's 21 years of age. He's also 5'8". So I'll be interested to see if he comes over, plays in their training camp, and then in the preseason I'll be interested to see how NHL ready he might be. Because again, he's 21 years of age. He's 3 years older than a lot of the guys on the board. Almost 4 years older than some. So, yeah, we'll see how Norberg does. Then at 72nd, Swedish again. Oscar Pettersson, a right winger. He's a power forward, but there are some skating issues that drag down his stock. At 87th, they draft Thomas Hamara, a defenseman, likely third pairing at the NHL level. And he's average at everything. There's nothing that he's fantastic at. There's no like big glaring weakness. He's just an average, good third pairing defenseman at the NHL level is where he's projected to be. At 104th, they draft Stephen Halliday, center, smart playmaker, skating issues. So there it is again. At 136th, they draft Jorian Donovan, Sean Donovan's kid, defenseman. He's smart, good skater, but the thing is he didn't play very many minutes, so he's on a stacked team. And they're wondering if when he plays more minutes, will his play get a lot better? Or could it expose some weaknesses in his game that were protected by him being on the third pairing this year? So that is one of those boom or bust kind of guys. But at 136th, there's no risk. At 143rd, they draft Cameron O'Neill, a right winger. Dominated the USHL, but they're wondering about how some of this is going to translate at a higher level. And he's seen as likely a bottom six forward in the National Hockey League. At 151st, Ottawa grabs their goaltender, Kevin Riedler, or Riddler. I'm going to call him Riddler. Goaltender, 6'6", 201 pounds. So, big kid. 6'6", big goaltender. 168th overall, they draft Theo Wahlberg, a defenseman. Big, physical, unlikely to produce points at the NHL level, so he would be very much just a guy who's your defensive guy, maybe a number 6, maybe a number 7, that kind of thing. At 207th overall, Ottawa drafts Tyson Dick, a center. He's actually from here in Abbotsford, and he's headed to UMass. So best of luck to him. And yeah, that's kind of fun when you look and see Abbotsford. All right, from Abbotsford. Cool. So yeah, we'll see what happens there with him. And then we move on to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay drafts 31st overall. They get Isaac Howard, a left winger. Good skating, good shot. Needs to cut down on turnovers. So that's the one thing with Howard, and so gets the turnovers in line. Good shot at him making it to the NHL. At 86, they draft Lucas Edmonds, right winger, 21 years of age, and he needs work on his play without the puck. So he's pretty good with the puck. He needs to work on his play without the puck. Tampa Bay's really good at developing players. At 160th, Nick Malik is drafted, a goaltender, son of Merrick Malik, who played, of course, in Vancouver and Carolina and elsewhere. Good tools all around. So seen as a pretty good goaltender. And again, when you're drafting these guys at 18, 19 as a goaltender, it really is a crapshoot. There's a lot of good things to like about these goalies, and there's obviously going to be some rough around the edges there too. Then at 192nd, Tampa Bay drafts Connor Kurth, a right winger. He's an overager as well. Skilled shooter, some skating issues there that held him back from being drafted previously. 223rd overall, Dylan Gill, a defenseman, good passer, but nothing really jumps out with his game to say this projects as being NHL level. At 224th, they drafted Klavs Weinbergs, a left winger. He played in both the MHL and had a handful of games in a Latvian league as well. So, again, this is one of those ones that they may have some information on him that they say, you know what, we'll take a 7th on him. We'll take a flyer on him then. And then we get into, of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs. So for Toronto, not an overly busy draft. At 38th, they draft Fraser Minton, a center. Strong finish to the season, likely a 4th liner at the NHL level. Interestingly enough, at 95th, they draft Nick Moldenhauer, a right winger. He's seen as a good passer, good physical game, and 3rd line upside. So the first guy they draft is seen as probably a 4th liner, and the second guy they draft is potentially a 3rd liner in the NHL. At 122nd, they get a goaltender, Dennis Hildeby. Now, he's 6'6". He was number 1 ranked on Hockey Prospect. I talked about him before. And he improved throughout the season. So he's an overager, sure, but he improved throughout the season. And this may end up being a really smart pickup by the Toronto Maple Leafs. At 134th, they drafted Nikita Gerbenkin, a right winger. Good skater, hard worker. There are some issues with his overall consistency to his game. And then, last but not least, at 218th, the Toronto Maple Leafs draft Brandon Lazowski, a left winger. He was number 88 on Hockey Prospects list, so this may end up being a steal as well. Quickness and it is an issue with his game, but he's a good goal scorer. So may end up being a good goal scorer, 7th round pick. Again, there's no risk really with a 7th round pick being thrown his way. and we'll see whether or not that ends up being a good value pickup too. So there you go. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below regarding how the Atlantic Division teams did. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.